Hello, everybody. My name is Traven Rice. I am the arts and culture editor and co-founder of The Lowdown. We're here at P&T Knitwear at 180 Orchard, and we've been talking with all kinds of culture changers, and I'm really excited and delighted and honored to have James Fuentes, owner of James Fuentes Gallery here. James is was born and raised on the Lower East Side and has been working in the neighborhood for about 17 years, so seen a lot of culture change, I would say, and is in the midst of a move, or just moving right now, to Tribeca, and has also recently, about a year ago, opened up a gallery in Los Angeles. So we're really excited to talk about whatever you want to say that's coming up as you're sort of officially getting ready to leave the neighborhood. There is one final exhibition at your space at 55 Delancey, and that's running till May 25th. That's a study in form, chapter 2, curated by Arden Wohl. So a little bit about James. Since 2007, James Fuentes has championed a gallery program that is led first by exceptional contemporary artists who are atypical from the conventions of their field. The gallery is known for its focus on humanity, history, and society with a non-exclusionary approach, positioning itself as a leader in the field as our contemporary institutions seek to do the same. In the spring of 2023, the gallery opened an outpost in the Melrose Hill neighborhood of Los Angeles, and in March 2024, it inaugurated its new location at 52 White Street in Tribeca. After being in the LAS Gallery for almost 17 years, he will be heading over there, I would say.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. And it's pretty wonderful to be sitting on Orchard Street, which I think for me maybe is the definition of what set this neighborhood apart for me, where I realized this neighborhood was unlike any neighborhood anywhere.
This street?
In New York City, yes. Because on Saturdays, they used to close off Orchard Street, and all of the retailers would push their wares outside, and it would be this like outdoor shopping experience. And some of my earliest memories were of this street kind of running around and feeling so liberated and free as a kid, because I grew up not too far away from here in the Vladeck housing projects, and not that it was unsafe, actually. When I look back, it was actually a pretty safe and supportive community there, but to be able to like literally run down the middle of a street that's usually like for cars, was pretty it was thrilling, as a kid. And just kind of getting a feel for merchants, and maybe this legacy, this mercantile legacy of the Lower East Side, that was also extremely international. I would say that the legacy of what makes the Lower East Side iconic, the legacy of immigration, it's still extremely palpable. You see it everywhere, and I always really have to pause when I hear somebody saying, "Oh, New York is done. New York is over. It's not. New York used to be better." This, that, or the other. It shows a real lack of appreciation for the brilliance of what the city is and continues to be. Thank you for inviting me to have this conversation, and for your focus and your perspective on the Lower East Side, because there's quite a lot to unpack in terms of its cultural importance, and there's very little consistent focus on analyzing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, it's like peeling back layers and layers and layers. So once you start, there's no end, I've found. But it's really has been delighting me to see, as much as everyone always does say, oh, those days are over, or this is over, or that's over, everything's changed so much. I don't know, I do feel that it's really vibrant. It's still really exciting, still so much culture. And I think that you really have played a huge part in contributing to that over the last 17 years. I mean, when we started doing the Lowdown in 2009, you had just, you were still at St. James.
Yeah, I was still in like southern Chinatown, or technically what they call Two Bridges.
Yeah.
Down there, but I was part of the nascent Lower East Side gallery community, you know. So. Yeah.
And we were aware of that at that time. We've been aware of what you've been doing this whole time.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and that's really what started. You know, that was the beginning of the gallery back then. But basically, in 2003, the first galleries opened in this neighborhood, and I was working for this pretty iconic gallery owned by Jeffrey Deitch, and when I observed that there was one or two galleries opening up on Orchard Street, there was one, the other one was on Canal and Orchard 47, Michelle Macaron down on Canal Street. Like, it blew my mind that there was galleries opening down in my old neighborhood, you know. I couldn't believe it. Rivington Arms, which was on Rivington Street, I was like, oh man, one day it would just be a dream to be able to be a part of that community, and it would be so meaningful for me to have like a contemporary art gallery in my old neighborhood, because it was kind of my old life, my early life, meeting my adult life. The fact that those two things converged. So sooner rather than later, that moment came, and my first location was down on St. James Place and Madison Street, which is kind of a bit of no man's land. It's not any particular neighborhood, but it's adjacent enough to the Lower East Side where people were excited about writing stories for the Financial Times and the New York Times about this emerging Lower East Side gallery district. And I was a part of that narrative. And that was also another dream come true, because I had romanticized, you know, the 70s galleries in Soho. I had romanticized the storefront artist-run galleries in the East Village in the 80s. And then I realized, wait a minute, here's my opportunity this is my generation's version of what I've been reading about that's been happening in previous generations. So I was 29 years old at the time, but I already had this feeling of the fact that this was an immense responsibility, you know, and opportunity for me to make an impact. So, you know, an exhibition comes and goes and stuff, but then there also has to, in order for a gallery program to have Riz, as they say, as the kids say, I feel like it's important to have like underlying motivations or undercurrents or fire, you know, or reason for being, you know, and intention. And intention. So that was definitely one of them.
Was to be sort of contributing in a specific neighborhood that had a lot of meaning for you.
Yeah, because the thing is that while there was articles being written in 2007 about the invention of this brand new gallery district, I had a very clear understanding that this was not new at all. You know, there was a huge precedent. There was a lot of projects and activities and artists that happened, and events that happened all around us that, you know, people, I was a little, you know, weirded out by how quickly people forget, you know, back then. I was like, historical amnesia is so real, you know, and it's very intense. But actually, I think it pales in comparison to the level of historical amnesia there is now, you know, because things are moving so fast, you know, and the way people get their information is not by kind of being on the ground so much anymore, but it's so much more about digital space. Things are moving at a rapid clip, and this neighborhood is always just a mishmash regurgitation of like what the world is like.
Yeah,
know?
Absolutely. And in a diverse way, as far as lots of, always a different wave of immigrants coming in and keeping things really vital, like exciting and, interesting. I'm interested in how you present, even just in the description of the gallery, the fact that your focus is on humanity, history, and society with a non-exclusionary approach. So how did growing up in this neighborhood affect that view?
Well, growing up here, I grew up in an extremely diverse setting that is probably difficult to find anywhere else in the world, you know? And so that was something that was really very familiar and comfortable for me. And, you know, having grown up in low-income housing and you know, the housing projects, I was always very aware that a lot of the conversation around art had to do about where you came from and who you are and who you know. And I think from the outset, I was like, well, I came from nowhere in a way, relatively speaking. So I was very conscientious about not imposing that kind of judgment on maybe artists that I was looking at or people that I was interacting with at the gallery. And basically how that impacted my perspective is that I'm really focused on the artwork and the artist first. Maybe later, for instance, I'll read the CV, you know. But I realized that a majority of my colleagues at the time, you know, like who had an interest in opening a gallery, their late 20s, they were kind of more interested in the CV first. They were interested in the credentials. They were interested in where artists went to school, who they know, all these other things that really far overpowered actually like what they were doing. And I just thought it was kind of an upside down way of looking at things. So yeah, I mean, in addition to kind of not having that non-exclusionary approach, I also by default was maybe a little more open-minded about working with a racially diverse group of artists. And in addition to that, some of my closest mentors and teachers were 50 years older than me. So I also had a non-ageist approach, you know. So I think that really kind of opened the playing field for me a lot in terms of the artists that I could collaborate with, because I was really looking in a way that nobody else was looking at the time. Now it's become, thankfully, much more acceptable and much more the priority, especially since there has been so much focus on, you know, social justice over the last 5 or 6 years. But this is frankly a new thing, you know,
yeah.
Especially for the art world. very few people cared at all about these issues before,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I probably just was moving through this field with my guard up and just kind of operating within the existing structure and finding my way to navigate the field. But then when the structure started to kind of rupture or collapse, I kind of found that there's actually, it made me a little more cognizant of you know, the conditions of my industry and field and my role in it and what I can do. So it's been a really incredible learning experience for me.
But it feels like it really just is just catching up with you.
Yeah, it's just catching up with me. I think about this a lot, you know, like I'm glad I've lived long enough to see this day, you know, because there's a lot of artists and people that had an immense amount of talent that just could not get their foot in the door, you know,
Yeah.
and they never lived to see this day. So I feel very lucky. But you know, the Lower East Side definitely gave added accelerator to the fire, you know, in terms of the context that we were presenting art in. And you know, the thing is, most people actually have a very open mind and have a lot of curiosity about other perspectives, you know. It's just about access points, I think.
Or just kind of a groupthink mentality where people don't think outside of the box, even when it comes to, you know, galleries and creativity.
Right.
Strangely, I would say. I mean, so I've read that you are very clear about starting out feeling that this was not going to be any good way to make a living, that it was going to be really hard, and that you got a bit discouraged at certain points.
Yes. Yeah, because when I opened the gallery 17 years ago, the art market that exists now was a pipe dream. You know, it was non-existent. You know, there was not the art market that existed now, and I think that the art market has actually proliferated due to our digital paradigm. This thing that I was poo-pooing a little earlier, you know, and maybe coinciding with that, the proliferation of like MFA programs and stuff like this. So like having an artist in the household used to be such a rare thing, but now it's much more commonplace, you know, because in the 70s there was maybe 2 or 3 MFA programs in the entire country, you know. Now there's hundreds, you know. So now the idea of being an artist is maybe not as like kind of elusive or rare or something. And so you've got a lot more artists out in the world, and then you have tools now to kind of get exposure, and that just creates like a larger field. It's a much larger, greater global field, and I think that's the thing that's really boosted the art market to this point where it's so significant and it's so large, you know. I haven't been following like the auctions so closely of this week at Christie's and Phillips and Sotheby's, but I imagine some of the biggest ticket items are being purchased from Japan, from other parts of Europe, you know. And so the way to get the message out there, the tools that we have as people who kind of market, you know, do marketing for artists and get the word out, we have more tools available to us. We have these portable document files.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know that's what PDF stood for. Ever since the PDF and the JPEG, like things really started changing.
Sure.
And straight up, like and I've also been able to see this shift from analog to digital in our field. It makes me feel like a dinosaur to be able to say that. But so yeah, it's comparable to the insane, immense change that I've seen downtown.
Yeah.
Like it's at that level where it's just, I don't even recognize this neighborhood anymore. In the same way I don't recognize the art industry anymore.
So dramatic.
It's very dramatic.
Yeah. I was interested I didn't realize that you had also studied film as well as anthropology. And
Yes.
and Jonas Mekas was a mentor.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of different types of art forms that have sort of been really influential and that you've been interested in.
Yes. I mean, all art forms. Music was my first love. And then that tuned me into poetry. And that's what led me to study at Bard College.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Bard College to study literature. And then when I was there, I found my people in the film department. And so my academic life really kind of took a few zigzags. But ultimately it was film and anthropology that I studied. And I would say the anthropological kind of framework or perspective has informed me a lot as well. And I worked, with this artist, Richard Nonis. We did a show together, and he had an anthropology background, and his thing was like, listen, you can look at this object from here, but like if you go to the side and look at it from there, and then there's so many different ways to look at this one thing, and very anthropological perspective, right? So,
and then the film part, though, I would say it's very experimental, very avant-garde.
Oh,
Jonas
yeah,
Mekas.
yeah, Jonas. Yeah, Jonas. Yeah, I mean, Jonas is part of this group of filmmakers in the late 60s. There have been textbooks that called expanded cinema, focused on these artists, but these artists were really next level alchemists where they were just working with film, but also it was branching out into all these other areas. There was painting on film by Stan Brakhage. There was Maya Deren and her kind of ritualistic film. There was Jonas and his diary film.
I had M.M. Sarah on. I have a film background too.
Oh yeah.
But M.M. Sarah came and talked about her experimental, work at that time.
Yeah. So it was just fertile territory. But then basically, in addition to kind of the experimental sort of mindset of that community of filmmakers, Jonas was a segue into the Fluxus narrative for me, which was this late 1960s art movement in New York that was post-Dada, and just like kind of the premise is that everyday life can be art, and that also blew my mind, So those were kind of those were the seeds of kind of what my interest in contemporary art became, and I still to this day am very close with the Mekas family. And we represent Alison Knowles, who's one of the founders of the Fluxus movement. So yeah, still very much a part of what we do.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, and there's a very big group, it's a group show. That's the last show of the space on Delancey Street. Can you tell us about that show?
Yeah, absolutely. So Arden Wohl, who is a dear friend and amazing curator, poet, organizer of poetry events, just like one of these real catalysts for the New York art community. She's one of these figures who really just brings people together and has such a enthusiasm and generosity towards artists that I would say she's a real catalyst for like the downtown art community. She has a background in film herself, and that's how that's what we connected over when we first met 20 plus years ago. She was studying filmmaking at NYU, and so Arden has curated a 2-part show. The premise of both exhibitions have been the intersection between poetry and art, and so I would say that's kind of the foundation of the show. But then, particularly because this was the last show that we were doing at Delancey Street after being on Delancey for 14 years, it also really became a community show, so it's one of these friends and family group shows as well, where we couldn't really fit even a fraction of our friends and family, but 90 artists. And so we put a nice dent.
That's a lot of artists.
Yeah. We put a good dent in the friends and family situation.
Yeah. So what's it been like? How does that feel to really, it seems like a pretty good amount of time to me to be closing shop there.
Yeah, it feels great. Doing the show is very cathartic, and probably the right thing to do as like an emotional kind of like cathartic goodbye to the space, and just really bring this community together of 90 artists that are in the show, for instance, felt right and very meaningful. And, my love of the Lower East Side is also like part of my love of New York City, So my new space is only like 8 blocks away, but it's like, it's amazing because the perception of Tribeca versus Lower East Side is so vastly different, like people just have such a different disposition or perspective on these neighborhoods, and they are wildly different neighborhoods. But I just keep thinking about the fact, especially since I'm going back and forth, it's truly just 8 blocks, and it's wild how wildly different, the city can be, even from block to block.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about kind of taking what I've learned from our chapter in the Lower East Side and kind of applying it to kind of the anthropological work that we're doing in Tribeca. And it's really fertile territory because it's been an artist community for 50 years. There's so many artists who had live work spaces there, still continue to have live work spaces there. And but then it's also changed because now it's also a community of like the demographic is like the patrons of art are living in Tribeca as well now. Yeah. So it's this like pretty amazing combination for us as a gallery because our clients, people who are clients live in the neighborhood, people who we work with as advisors live and work in the neighborhood, as do artists live and work in the neighborhood. And there's going to be an artist who lives next door to the gallery that we're going to be announcing a show with soon that I'm very excited about. But yeah, this opportunity would not have come without us having made this move, So it felt like a nice moment to shake things up. And, I did for a moment have this dream of like being like Russ and Daughters, or Katz's, where I was just going to be there forever, sweeping the sidewalk until the day I die, maybe passing it on to my kids. But I don't own the space. I'm just a leaseholder. So my lease is up, and so I gotta sign a new lease somewhere else. So.
Yes, and you can come back and visit.
Of course.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Come across those 8 blocks.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the other thing is that I'm actually really thrilled that I've found a way to keep my heart in this neighborhood is because I've joined the board of the Henry Street settlement.
Oh, excellent.
Recently. So, I mean, talk about like high impact organization and, you know, legacy in the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be part of that community.
Great.
So yeah, that feels like, our work in the Lower East Side is going to continue.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.